Raven and Punk's not going to do.
They probably would have back then.
They probably would want to, but
Punk would have. I don't know if
Raven ain't doing that shit. He barely did a moonsault. So, and then he would go on to win tag team gold with Colt Cabana, beating the Briscoes. Yes, they were still there back then. That's how old the Briscoes
back when Mark Briscoe was like 15,
and before they were like super crazy. Let alone they were just out of their minds a little bit. So then, of course, he would go on to have the feud of all feuds with Samoa Joe for the World Heavyweight Championship.
Those were some really good matches.
They were. So the fun fact, the second match that they had together was the first match on North American soil to get a 5-star rating from Uncle Dave in 7 years.
Yeah, as soon as I found out that he gave it a 5-star match, I went to I went to the ring up. This was probably in like 2005 when I got back into wrestling. So this has been out for like a year at this point. Mm-hmm. But I was like, I have to see this match if it was that good. And that's where I was introduced to both CM Punk and Samoa Joe. And I was like, all right, checks out.
I'm in. He's right. Fun fact, the match that got the 5-star before that was the first Hell in the Cell match between Shawn Michaels and Undertaker.
That's why I was like, man, I love that match. So let's see what these dudes are going to do.
Completely different, but still amazing. And then around 2003, 2004, he was briefly in the original TNA when it was NWA TNA. And then he was actually in the Ravens Gathering. So, fun fact, he just worked around him. And then he had a skirmish, shocking.
With who?
Teddy Hart. Weird how anybody could ever have a skirmish with one Theodore Hart. But
Is
here
that
we
sarcasm?
are. Yes, very much so. Sorry.
I'm glad he does seem to be doing better, though.
Teddy?
So good for Teddy.
I think someone's, kind of helped keep him down a little bit.
Maybe Uncle Brett was like, don't end up like me, don't get screwed.
So, he was out of TNA at that point because he didn't really give a shit. So then he had a WWE tryout match, May 9th, 2005. Go back and check it out. I think he was on Sunday.
Velocity?
Yeah, Velocity. He was there. But then he accepts the deal with WWE in June. But then right after that, he wins the World Heavyweight title in Ring of Honor from Austin Aries. And so begins the Summer of Punk, where he knew he was going to go to WWE. He told everybody he was going to go to the WWE. He even signed the contract on the Ring of Honor World Heavyweight title.
That was some really, good storytelling on Ring of Honor. I'm really glad that Ring of Honor wasn't like, ugh, we're losing CM Punk. I guess, we'll just, have him put over some dude.
Right.
They were like, this is going to be a great storyline for the next month. Let's roll with it.
So then he loses the title.
Just someone else going to the WWE, right?
Yes. But then his last match, which is actually a great match because if you watch it, you could see the tears in his eyes.
Was the old D-Bry?
No,
Bryan?
Is that who he lost it?
I don't know.
That's not who. I don't think he lost it.
I thought his last match.
Oh, his last match was Colt Cabana.
That makes way more sense. Why did I ever think it was Daniel Bryan?
So of course, then he goes over to WWE. He's in OVW for a while, and then
he becomes a Paul Heyman guy.
He was
because Paul Heyman was in.
Paul
OVW
Heyman was running OVW. Well, he's the first one there and last one to leave. So was Paul Heyman. So that's how you know. So then he goes on to debuting on ECW, which I think we all might remember because he's like, I'm straight edge and that fuels me and all this other shit.
He's doing his weird wrist lock things.
Oh, yeah. We're doing Vanderlei Silva doing his wrist stretching thing. Mm-hmm. So then, of course, he goes on to have a great series of matches. What's that?
I said, you don't scare me.
He goes on to have a great series of matches with John Morrison for the ECW title before finally winning it at SummerSlam. He then goes on to win the Money in the Bank at WrestleMania 24, even though he did technically debut at 22?
3.
Was it 23 where he was on?
Yeah, that was in Detroit.
Yeah, where he was one of the quote-unquote gangsters on John Cena's entrance. So then, of course, he cashes in the Money in the Bank on the other Spotlight superstar this week, Edge, to win the World Heavyweight title June 23rd.
Booyah.
So he never lost that title because he got attacked by Legacy. That's when it was a 4-man group instead of the 3-man that it was probably the next week.
Manu,
yeah, he didn't quite not make it. But Punk got punted in the head, and then somehow he can't make it into a match.
And the refs were just like, yeah, I guess you can take a spot, Randy Orton.
Checks out.
That makes sense.
So then he goes on to win the tag titles with Kofi Kingston, defeating Cody Rhodes and Ted DiBiase.
You guys kicked me in the face, so I'm going to take your titles.
With this guy. And then he later wins the IC title, making him the 19th Triple Crown champion. And the fastest to achieve it, apparently. So he then goes to win the Money in the Bank again at WrestleMania 25.
We were there.
We were there. Then he goes in to cash it in on Jeff Hardy and turns heel because they're like, what? You're supposed to be both good guys. Why are you... And that's when the Straight Edge Society starts. And that was fucking genius.
It was probably like the best... It was probably the best like angle that he was a part of.
And he wrote it all
Maybe
himself.
Not the best, but it was...
We're about to get to the best.
It felt like the most fun to that point angle that he had been a part of.
And the Royal Rumble, when he, in between eliminating people... He would just cut promos, which is fucking genius. Speaking of cutting promos, after he becomes a new Nexus leader, he drops...
Yeah, what the fuck was that all
I
about?
don't fuck... who the hell wrote that shit? Well, we got the
Freddie
core
Prinze
out of
Jr.
it. Probably.
Actually, I do think that he was pretty close. He was close to someone, like a
Prince?
top... No.
Punk?
Yes, Prince was close to either Punk or Cena. I can't remember, but... Probably not Punk. That doesn't. He's probably like, you're not punk rock enough to.
You're a second generation
you're Mary Buffy,
entertainer.
Bro. You're not.
Punk could be a giant Buffy fan. He is a comic book fan.
That might be true too.
Okay. So then afterwards, while he is the new Nexus leader, we get that infamous pipe bomb promo, and then that leads to my personal Money in the Bank favorite moment, which is 2011, Chicago, Illinois. Punk defeats John Cena in the second 5-star rating of Punk's career for WWE. Takes the belt, blows a kiss to Vinnie Mac, runs up the stairs, and then runs out of the arena, hops in a cab, goes to his house, and then the best picture I've ever seen in my entire life, he opens his fridge, throws the belt in, grabs some water, and it's perfect. It's amazing.
That was like one of the only pay-per-views we bought that year. Mm-hmm. We didn't
bought Chicago pizza for
it. We didn't watch every pay-per-view back then, but we were like, yeah, we're totally buying this one. And
because his contract was quote unquote over at the end of that night. And so they were essentially doing the Ring of Honor thing, except for he's not going anywhere, but he's just not in the company. So he's going to take his belt.
I do think his contract was up.
He was. They apparently signed it like that night, like in the bowels of Rosemont Horizon. So then, of course, he comes back. He loses his title to Alberto Del Rio after beating John Cena at SummerSlam of the very year because he was attacked by Kevin Nash. And then all of a sudden, Alberto's coming in and cashing in his Money in the Bank.
I forgot all about that.
So did I. I didn't because I started reading. I was like, oh, right, this is what happened.
He called him like a cook at the Waffle House. I remember that.
Right. So then he regains the championship at Survivor Series of that year, and thus begins the 434-day title reign of CM Punk, which was recognized as the longest championship reign in quote-unquote modern era, until Brock Lesnar broke it in June of last year. Thanks, Brock.
Except Punk had a match like every month.
Yes, he was actually wrestling. People actually knew who he was the champion. So then he would go on to have a feud with The Undertaker that ended at WrestleMania 29, which was the last time they were in New York, and I thought that was amazing. He would walk out of the WWE in January of the following year, and thus began his weird retirement/lawsuit with WWE.
We don't have to get into that.
No, we're not, believe me. So afterwards, he would go on to fight and lose 2 times in the UFC. He writes for Marvel Comics sometimes, and he does comments.
He does like hockey commentary and
and Cage Fury Fighting Championship, which is a UFC affiliate. So he's still under contract and doing stuff.
He's still under contract to the UFC. That he's apparently not. They haven't dropped him yet.
No.
Wonder if Dana's just like, nah, he's fine. Let's keep it.
If he can do commentary, why not? It's a good transition. Plus, I know he's too old to be a champion because
he's too old to even fight.
I don't know. Randy Couture
did this his whole fucking life.
But he wasn't an MMA fighter.
CM Punk, yeah, but he was a wrestler. CM Punk was a pro wrestler, which is not
the same.
No. CM Punk started in his backyard, okay? Randy Couture started like wrestling at a collegiate level. So
true story.
His base, he just doesn't have the base. Like, it's not. I'm not saying he would never have been good at it, but like he just did not have the base to like jump in his 30s and be like, I can do this.
Right. He was legitimately starting from the bottom.
Yeah,
Drake style.
And like it
didn't make it to the top.
It's too much. Like there's just too much. It's too competitive now.
Mm-hmm. Oh, without a doubt, he got it in the most competitive, right as it was becoming the most competitive time. So it was not a good idea. And I actually watched both of his fights, researching this because I hadn't seen him before. He was better in the second one. Obviously, it went to decision as opposed to him getting choked out in the first round. But what can you do?
So yeah, now he's a UFC fighter who occasionally will come into the Indies and go to sleep people, I guess.
That's true. He did come back 2 weeks ago, quote unquote, that we may or may not know.
For Silas Young's promotion.
Is it Silas Young's?
Mm-hmm.
Oh, I know he was in an Ace Steel match, so I just thought he was helping his buddy.
He had the same hoodie on that he had on earlier that day.
But he just put a mask on.
But anyway, CM Punk, Edge, Superstar Spotlight.
Well done, guys.
Let's talk a little bit about the new NWA. I, for one, am loving it.
So I love it, but I also have a bit of a problem with it.
What's your problem?
So they're retro to a good point, and on the extreme, the bad points. Did you actually look at any of the titles?
Mm-hmm.
They're very small. They are those Google image searches for like 40s and 50s wrestlers with the tiny belt buckle-ish looking belts.
That's unfortunate.
It is. I'm okay with the designs.
I'm okay with I like the national one.
The national one and the world heavyweight are the best ones. The other ones are very tiny.
That is very unfortunate.
Yes.
They could have done that. They could have done that differently.
So Villain Enterprises won. So okay,
surprise win.
So apparently, if you won the Crockett Cup, you then were also the NWA tag team champions.
They only said that a week before. Maybe. By the way, whoever wins also is the end. I guess whatever.
So Villain Enterprises lost the Ring of Honor titles at G1 Supercard, and then they win the NWA tag team champions. So congratulations!
But they're still the 6-man. So
they are still 6-man. Colt Cabana is your new NWA national champion.
I was a little surprised by that.
And then Billy Corgan. Apparently no. Well, then Willie Mack signs with Impact Wrestling, so it just makes sense.
That makes a lot of sense.
And then Billy Corgan was on Busted Open Radio, was talking about how they're going to do another key event later in the summer, early fall, but they're going to have a pop-up show in the summertime. And then they're looking to do some episodic shows, but they're not sure if it's going to be on an actual YouTube or Honor Club or maybe some national.
I wonder. I mean, I almost imagine that the NWA could operate with it just being a YouTube show and latching on to other promotions.
Mm-hmm.
I think you could do this with so many. You could do it with any of the promotions that have good TV production, MLW, Impact, Ring of Honor, good enough that AEW for all I care. Good enough that you're going to have. Good quality and fans.
Yeah,
I think that's the big thing. Most people are the NWA. Ugh. I mean, not most people are ugh, but you would talk about the NWA during the Attitude Era, and people would be like, "What the fuck is that?"
Right.
And you'd be like, "Oh yeah, man! It's they have a promotion over in North Richland Hills," and they're like, "I don't know anyone that wrestles there, so I don't care."
Yep.
But now they've latched onto these big indies, and so you'll get something like Nick Aldis and Marty Scurll. Super great. It
was a great match.
I love it. Exactly.
Yeah.
Super great. I think that this is the way to build something like this.
Right.
Is to continue to do that and to do pop-up shows and the 7th anniversary show was okay. The card wasn't super great, but it wasn't super bad either.
Right.
I didn't watch the Crockett Cup, but I heard the production was better.
Production was better. So they did a weird thing where sometimes if you watch Ring of Honors, just the regular shows they do that aren't their big shows or whatever, they'll have it at a venue where the guys are coming out on the stage and then having to go to the side of the stage to come down the stairs, as opposed to them just building a rampway or just put stairs down in the middle.
Billy Corgan's all about that DIY life, I guess.
I mean, so is Ring of Honor apparently.
Yeah.
But then they also had a bunch of the old timers, which is perfectly fine. There's nothing wrong with that. Maybe don't show up like you're going to a family barbecue, because there's a lot of dudes in just shorts and T-shirts just showing up, and I'm like,
NWA Legends?
Yeah, not good. Whatever, I guess.
I think that's what you're going to get with the NWA, unfortunately.
They should just have suits in the back for these people.
I think that the NWA, especially like when they do that sort of throwback to the past,